Thanks for coming.
Well, obviously, much has happened since we were last together. I remember, and you may well remember this too, that Bob Gates said that after the Berlin Wall came down, we had a holiday with history. And if you recall, we thought big power competition was going away and that our challenges would simply be against terrorism. Well, we certainly had terrorism. We had a war in Afghanistan, a war in Iraq, all related to terrorism or the fear of terrorism. Now, regretfully, as we've learned in the last week, we still have terrorism, and what's changed is we have two big power competitors at the same time. So the holiday from history is clearly over. We anticipate, and you've been writing about it, the administration will send up a supplemental that deals with Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, and Republicans are going to want something serious about the border. And so we'll take a look at the package when they send it up, make suggestions to improve it if that's needed. But clearly, the world has changed dramatically in the last 10 days.
And let me just say that all of us are heartbroken and disgusted, really, by the atrocities committed by Hamas against Israel. There are some in this country, and you see it more in our college and university campuses, who don't seem to see this issue with moral clarity. But it really is an example of unspeakable evil committed against innocent civilians, innocent children. And I can say that the Republican conference stands in solidarity with Israel and its right not only to exist, but also to defend itself and to protect its citizens from these types of attacks. Right now, the administration's focus should be on getting Americans home, working on trying to free up some of the hostages that are still held in Gaza, and I hope that will be first and foremost what they work on. Let me just say, too, that as you think about this issue and the issue of national security, the director of the FBI warned just recently that there could be copycat attacks here in the United States. And that really bears on one of the issues that the leader mentioned with respect to whatever package emerges from the Congress and is put forward by the White House, that we deal with the issue of our southern border. And if you look at just in the last 2 years, they have a category called special interest aliens. And in that category, there have been 659 Iranians that they have apprehended trying to come across our southern border. And in this last year, there have been 151 people on the terrorist watch list who have been apprehended at our southern border, which is more than the last 6 years combined. This is a national security issue, and it demands attention from this administration. And so I hope that as we contemplate dealing with a package up here that addresses the needs in Israel and Ukraine and Taiwan and other places around the world, but that focuses clearly on the national security challenges that we have here right at home in the United States. And that is a porous southern border that this administration has ignored since the time it took office.
Well, national security starts with border security, and under Joe Biden, our country is a lot less safe because our southern border is wide open. If you talk to Border Patrol, they will tell you that bad people are coming in record numbers from around the world. terrorists, criminals exploiting the significant increase in the flow of illegal immigrants to the country. Hundreds on the FBI terrorist watch list have already been apprehended, but they can't tell us how many got through, how many are here already, because under Joe Biden, close to 2 million illegal immigrant gotaways have gotten here by escaping detection at all. It's gotten so bad that the Department of Homeland Security issued additional terror warnings last month about increased terrorism and criminal actors. The world watched the horror of Hamas in Israel a week and a half ago. Women, children, tortured, raped, beheaded, 30 Americans killed, others held captive. Terrorists would love to see the exact same thing happen to us right here. And Joe Biden's open border policy makes that our greatest threat of terrorism. Republicans have solutions that will actually work. Our Secure the Border Act of 2023 has passed the House already. It provides the manpower, the technology, and actual physical barrier to work against illegal immigration and protect our communities, protect our citizens. Under Joe Biden, he has undermined our nation's safety and security.
The United States stands firmly beside Israel. I was privileged to lead a delegation that was bipartisan into the Middle East this past week. Our final destination was Israel. Unfortunately, we found out about the attacks upon Israel by Hamas. Our journeys were stalled momentarily, but the delegation and I were able to travel into Israel and meet with many of the Israeli leaders, including the Prime Minister. So this president has failed in many different respects. First, we need to be focusing on the release of the hostages. Our hearts are just in agony. As I spoke to the families of the Israelis who had loved ones that were murdered and taken away into the Gaza Strip, I spoke with Americans in Israel who had family members that were affected by the terrorist attacks in Israel. We must focus on getting these hostages back. These loved ones are in dire straits, not knowing whether their brothers, their sisters, their parents have been tortured or killed by Hamas. And make no bones about it, the Hamas terrorists that are holding these hostages, they are backed by Iran. They are backed by Iran. And we see this administration appeasing the Iranians. Since President Joe Biden took office, he has lined the pockets of the Iranians by $80 billion. And we know that those funds go directly to terrorist organizations. Hamas, 93% of their funding comes from Iran. 100% of the funding to the Palestinian Islamic Jihad comes from Iran. We also know that they sponsor Hezbollah, the Houthis, and many other terrorist organizations around the region. We need to step up as America and push back, not just against the terrorists, but against this Iranian regime. And we have to tell our president it is absolutely unacceptable to continue with his appeasement towards the Iranians. We must stand with Israel. Quite literally, American and Israeli lives are on the line.
Well, I think you're going to hear a lot of us, I think, very united in what we're talking about in terms of Israel. I can't start talking without expressing my just deep, heartfelt sadness and horror at what we've seen happening. And, excuse me, I'll have to tell my husband to call me later. And so, I want to say it is just unbelievable to see the heartlessness, the brutality, the inhumane attack by the terrorists of Hamas on Israel. I've questioned myself a lot, thinking, how does your heart get so cold and so filled with hate that you can do such crimes against humanity, against innocent babies and children? And so that behooves us, I think, here today to echo what everybody else has said, that we must stand with Israel against the terrorists. You know, we got a lot on our plates. We've got Ukrainian aid that we need to be serious about and consider and move forward with, and we've got the Israeli situation and the fight against terrorism. And you might say to yourself, how can we possibly manage all of this? You know how we can do it? Because we're the United States of America, and we must do it. We're the superpower, the beacon of freedom, the one country in the world that has the allies, the friendships, and the confidence to be able to go forward with meaningful aid, meaningful support, and how much that reverberates around the globe. So I would say that in the next several weeks, we are going to be considering different packages. We're going to be looking at helping not just Israel, but also helping in Ukraine and around the world. This is a pivotal tipping point time, I think. And it's time for us to look not so much inward, but to look outward, because in the end, it's going to be our own national security. I echo those concerns of our southern border. It does make you think, do we really know what's going on? Who's coming in, what they're doing, what kind of cells are developing? And the answer to that is probably not as much as we need to. So with that, I would say I stand with Israel as I stand with all of you and many folks across this great country. Thank you.
Afghanistan, Algeria, Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco, North Korea, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Uzbekistan, Yemen. Why did I just name off those countries? This is not an exhaustive list. I was at the southern border on Wednesday, October 11th. I asked Border Patrol agents who's entered this country in the last 10 days. Our Border Patrol agents have encountered at least one person from each of those countries in the first 10 days of October. In fact, when I was there at the Ursula Processing Center, just out there near McAllen, Texas, they told me they had encountered 4 Syrian men overnight. In fact, I was able to go in one of the holding rooms and physically see these 4 Syrians they'd encountered overnight by Border Patrol. This is a national security threat. There have been 1.5 million known gotaways. So we talk about the nearly 8 million that Border Patrol have encountered since Joe Biden took office. On top of that are 1.5 million known gotaways. What's a known gotaway? As I chatted with Border Patrol, that means they had physical eyes on somebody crossing the border, but were not able to encounter them or apprehend, or they saw it through video cameras. I asked, how many additional people do you think have come across that are not even known getaways? They said, we have no idea, obviously. But they said it's probably at least 50% on top of that 1.5 million. On day one, Joe Biden literally put up an open house sign on the southern border, and the world, including adversarial countries, have noticed, and they're flooding us down south. It is easier now for potential terrorists to come across our southern border, but once they're here, many are being released into our country, often to major cities, without a trace. As evil regimes like Hamas attack our ally Israel, and our adversaries are increasingly emboldened, we should be concerned about terror cells moving into the United States. And if Joe Biden and the Democrats won't secure the border now, when are they ever going to do it? It is time to secure our southern border and start enforcing the rule of law.
Alex.
Do you have any reaction to former President Trump saying that Hezbollah is very smart, and also his criticism of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
I certainly do. I can't disagree more. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization, just like Hamas, funded by the same source as Hamas. And Prime Minister Netanyahu is one of the great leaders of modern times. Andrew.
Can I ask about the supplemental which you mentioned up top? Do you worry that including Ukraine in this Israel package could compromise the Israel portion given the opposition to Ukraine among the House Republicans?
Well, I think we have to address the problem that I outlined at the beginning. The most recent attack in Israel is part of a broader concern developed during the Ukraine war. Basically, the democracies of the world are all on the same side. You see the South Koreans, the Japanese, the Taiwanese concerned about Ukraine. The Prime Minister of Japan said at one point, if you want to send President Xi a message, beat Putin in Ukraine. This is all interconnected. You've got the North Koreans, the Iranians, the Russians, and the Chinese, sort of, on the same side against the democratic world. So there's a connection between all of this, and I'm not surprised, frankly, that the administration seems to be inclined to send up a broad package. And as my colleagues have pointed out, the border part of it needs to be credible, not just some reference to it, but a credible dealing with the problem that Senator Daines just pointed out.
Peter McConnell, do you support Jack Liu's nomination to be the ambassador to Israel?
Well, I think he's having his hearing this week. We'll take a look at it.
Jim Jordan just failed to win the speaker vote. He's 20 votes short. Do you think the House should reinstall Kevin McCarthy or empower Patrick McHenry?
You guys cover the House. I got my hands full here in the Senate.
Thank